Welcome to the Southern California Security Innovation Summit. I'm Rob Woerner, and I'm here to speak with you about testing from a distance, a how-to guide for remote audits and assessments. I recommend you Google me to find out who I am. Again, my name is Rob Woerner. I've given a TED Talk called Hackers Wanted, where I'm looking for more hackers and how do we develop our technology and cybersecurity workforce. I teach for a university called Bellevue University, where I've been working in their cybersecurity studies for over 10 years. I also have my own cybersecurity consulting business, where I provide awareness, assessments, and advising to small and medium businesses. You can learn more on my website at cyber-aaa.com. I'm also a CISSP and a CISM, which are security credentials. Today, I'm going to be speaking with you about how we're now using remote for everything. It's our new normal. How can we better perform remote testing when we need to, given the distancing requirements? How do we leverage technology for our remote testing? I'll give you ideas on how to conduct interviewing techniques, asking the right questions in order to get the right answers from whoever you're assessing with your testing. And lastly, we'll cover the ideas of collecting evidence, how to gather data when you're not there in person. I want to start by asking you, what percentage do you work remote? Do you mostly work remote? I don't know about you, but I'm almost in that category, maybe about 75% for me. Or are you about half? So consider for yourself, how much are you now living and working remotely? I like to start by defining the problem. Start with why. So what is the problem? Well, of course, it's COVID-19. As I'm recording this, it's a continual issue where we're all having to distance, wear masks, which is a good idea, but we need to be able to work and talk to each other remotely. So you might just say, boy, Ron, that's just kind of obvious, isn't it? Well, it's the new normal. While we've had the capability of working remote for a long time, well over 10 years, we're now doing it almost constantly and continually. But life goes on. We need to learn how to best leverage the technologies and tools literally at our fingertips. We still need to perform our testing, audits, and assessments, often for compliance reasons. It's our new normal to wear a mask, right? The distancing requirements, this remote work, remote conferences, and our reliance on technologies and the internet. Let me ask you, how are you leveraging these remote technologies? Well, I'll talk to you about different communications and collaboration tools. I recommend looking at this How to Geek article on the 6 best video conferencing tools. How to best use cameras, lighting, to make sure we come across well, whether we're recording a session or we're talking to someone from a distance. How can we use other technologies for that communication, like Slack, Discord, Twitch, or screen sharing? And then how do we share files? Often as a part of testing, you may ask for the remote systems administrators to perform tests for you, to send you the results. Are they sending them to you safely and securely? We'll cover that. Let me ask you another question. What technologies have you used for remote video conferencing and remote communication? Is it Zoom, the Google Meet, Microsoft Teams, Cisco WebEx, GoToMeeting, or something else? I recommend you practice on almost all of them, because over the last 6 months, I've literally used each of these as part of audits, assessments, and testing. You also need that right equipment, whether it's a camera, and you very well, if you're performing testing, not only do you need a good camera, you may ask that the other people you're working with also have good cameras so you can kind of watch what they are doing. You may ask that they share their screen. Well, you want to make sure they have high quality equipment so you can see what they're doing to confirm. That includes having the right lighting, audio equipment, whether it's a Yeti mic like I have here or a headset, and having those right applications for sharing. I also going to encourage you to learn how to do online interaction. When you're conducting remote testing, try to be aware of that dead air, learning from broadcasters. If you're busy doing something or typing something, let the other people on the other end know what you are doing. You want to be hyper communicative, where you're continually telling people what you're doing. It's more so than IRL in real life, where people may see that you're busy typing or writing something down. What you want to do for maximum effect when you're performing a remote test is tell people, "Ooh, give me a minute while I write this down." People understand. It works well. Encourage the chat and questions. One downside to recording a video like this is you don't have the ability to ask me questions, and I don't have the ability to ask you questions. But if we're doing this more live, I would ask you to put into the chat what questions you have. And I would ask you some additional questions. Continually take a pulse, making sure people are understanding. If you have a live chat, have a moderator, someone who's watching that chat, who can then pipe in if there are any questions or comments, and just making sure everything stays cool. Because we still have problems with Zoom bombers. People who try to break into Zoom or other types of rooms just to cause a disruption. A moderator keeps everything cool. As I mentioned earlier, continually talk and say what you're doing. Also, for working with a camera, if you noticed, it's eye contact, staring at that little dot in the middle of the camera. This way people feel like they're part of the conversation. The downside to not doing this in a larger room is I don't get to look into your eyes. But I still want you to feel that I'm looking at you and considering what you're thinking. So practice with a camera as well. Learn a little bit about broadcasting. I'll now diverge into some of my ideas on how to perform remote testing, interviewing, auditing successfully. Let's dive right into some of these. First are Ron's testing tenets. My thoughts about how you need to be conducting these remote tests. First is CYA. No, not that CYA. For me, CYA is challenge your assumptions. Just because you think something may be right may not necessarily be true. Communicate and ask questions if you have assumptions. Always assume positive intent. I've been reading through the payment card industry testing requirements for remote testing, and it seems like they're assuming the people who may be doing the testing may not be honest. I'd like to take a different approach. I'll assume people are honest, but then I'll look for evidence in case they may sometimes try to cheat the system just a little. But assume positive intent rather than the negative intent. And then lastly is that trust but verify. We trust you to provide us that evidence, but I'm going to confirm that what you're saying is true. I'll show you how to do that here next. It comes down to this power of observation. Continually be looking and listening, and then trusting your gut. If something doesn't feel right, very well may not be right. So it's okay to trust your gut, and if something isn't correct, ask a question about it. And I recommend asking it as a question. I'll show you how. What do Socrates, Kipling, and Missouri all have in common? But Ron, we're auditors and testers. This is not an English class. But we use these ideas continually as part of good, robust testing. First of all, the Socratic Method. Now, I'm a university professor, but I've learned the power of asking questions, getting people to think. One of the largest values I get from testing and auditing is when people begin questioning for themselves and they find their own areas of opportunity. So me as an auditor and as a tester, I don't need to tell them what to do better. They end up telling themselves. Through the Socratic Method, it's asking the right questions. Be nosy. It's okay. That's our job as testers. Use the 5 whys of root cause analysis. Ask why 5 times. So why are we getting this result? Why is this result correct? Just keep asking why, and you'll find the real reason behind it, which may not always be obvious. That's where that CYA, challenge your assumptions, comes in. Kipling, 6 honest serving men. Remember from high school English? The how, who, why, what, when, and where. If you noticed, I'm using this with this presentation, where I started with the why, told you who, how, what. Use all of these methods of asking questions when you're performing your remote testing. So how did they get those results? What were they using? When did they perform the test? Where did they perform the test? Who performed the test for them? Because having those right access credentials can make a difference. And remember, I don't know is a good answer. It really is. It's a data point that means we don't have information at this point, and you just need to ask, what do we need to learn to change that I don't know to a more concrete answer? Lastly, for my little challenge to you here about Socrates, Kipling, and Missouri, Missouri's the show me state, right? We tend to be a little bit skeptical as auditors and testers. So it's one thing to tell me what you are doing. The next, show me. Give me that evidence. Prove it to me. And from there, we can collect it and use it as part of our testing and auditing report. But yes, I recommend most testers, auditors, at least be adopted residents of Missouri, the show me state. What do you use to get to the truth when you're performing a test, whether it's IRL in real life or OL online? Figure out what works best for you. Asking for proof, asking for questions. Hopefully your answer is all of the above, depending on who you're interacting with, what their business is, and what you're doing as far as your testing. I'm hoping if you're not answering, why do we need this again? Another tip I want to share with you is called open source intelligence, or Ascent. Open source intelligence is basically doing your homework using internet resources. What does the internet say about it? Google. Google is a cybersecurity, audit, assessor, and tester's best friend. If we don't know something, then using Google to look it up. If someone's trying to snowball us with an answer as part of the test, ask them, what do you mean? Well, according to this resource, it has a different meaning than you think. As an example, I'm continually using open source as part of my testing. If you're not familiar with it, again, time out, go to this website. It's called the Ascent Framework. This allows you to perform many different types of searches, whether you're looking for a particular username or email address or IP address, social networks, maybe some public records like a telephone number. This enables you to find many different types of searches just across the internet in one location. Take a moment, check out the Ascent Framework at ascentframework.com to learn more on how you can use these open source tools as a part of your testing. Let me warn you, this is a fun site. You can end up spending a lot of time here. Use these skills, though, only for good. Remember what is said in Spider-Man? With great power comes great responsibility. Next, I'll talk to you on slide 20 about collecting evidence. How are you performing your testing and then sharing the results? If you're asking the remote company to perform the tests for you, for example, you're asking them to perform a Nessus or Tenable scan, how are they going to get the results back to you? Are you using some type of a secure messaging or file share? Be very careful with open file shares across the internet. Could be very dangerous and allow for malware. Make sure whatever mechanism you have is restricted through access, and you're checking any of those files for potential malware. Email is very common as a communications tool. Are you using it to share evidence? Beware if any of that evidence may be sensitive in nature. I don't recommend using email. Email really is not meant for sharing files. There are a lot better tools. You can use maybe a cloud-based tool or SharePoint from Microsoft. Dropbox or Box both have security built into their presence. Same thing with SharePoint. A lot of it, though, is how you use it. Any of these tools can be used insecurely, so make sure you're restricting access, who can view the files, and who can put new files there or change or remove the files. Set the access permissions correctly for your situation. Google Drive is another option compared to SharePoint, Dropbox, and Box. What other tools do you use to securely share files between you and your clients as a part of your testing? Make sure you check it with a security professional. Make sure it's nice and safe for its confidentiality, integrity, and the availability. You want to make sure no one can accidentally remove all of this evidence. I've seen that happen with a client. We were working on an audit, and someone inadvertently was doing some cleanup and removed all of the evidence we had collected. And we had to redo all of that testing, which took numerous hours. You may want to also use a document tracking system so you can see the different types of versions. Nice thing with a lot of these tools like SharePoint, Google Drive, Dropbox, Box, as well as many others, there's a lot of others, they come built in with version control. My last point on this slide is how do we share? How do we maybe ask for the remote client to record what they're doing so we can see and prove that they've collected the evidence appropriately using the right techniques and the integrity of the testing is intact? Well, in Windows, did you know Windows 10 now comes with a game bar where you can automatically do screen recordings? It's really cool, really easy to do. You can use the Microsoft snipping tool. We use this all the time as part of the PCI audits. Take a snip of that for me, put it in a Word document, and then you can send me that Word document, which provides great evidence. If you're not familiar with the Microsoft Power Toys, these are just built-on add-ons to the Windows 10 environment. A lot of cool features as a part of it, or if there are other shortcuts. As always, take copious notes. Documentation is not a four-letter word. When I'm conducting remote testing or in-person testing and auditing, I'm always taking notes. Again, if I'm taking notes, I tell people, let me grab that as a note first. This way you always have your evidence and you can go back and recreate if the need comes to it. Take notes. I'm curious what questions you may have for me. This has been Testing from a Distance, a how-to guide for remote audits and assessments. I'm Rob Woerner, and I consult with my own company called Cyber-AAA or Cyber AAA, and I teach for Bellevue University. You can contact me through email, ronw@cyber-aaa.com, on my Twitter, ronw123, or through LinkedIn. To be honest, LinkedIn is probably my most favorite way to communicate with new people. Ship me your questions. I look forward to hearing from you. And until we meet again, go out and be safe as you're testing from a distance. I'm Rob Woerner.